My first question is to Shell. You started your career with crime writing, and since then you have published this very famous 11 series, Nordic Noir, Oslo Detective. So first I wanted to know, why is this subgenre of police procedural so big in Scandinavian crime writing? And secondly, has your uh, writing changed over the course of these 11 books in the series?
First of all, I think it's a little bit difficult to answer why this noir genre is so big, but I think there's a tradition for it in Norway and Sweden especially, and also Denmark has started to write some very good Scandinavian books, but then also I think it is supported by TV series and movies, but maybe also the content of the type of books are important. These Scandinavian books tends to concentrate on social issues, try to analyze a bit about how things happen. In the traditional English whodunit is the question is who did it. In Scandinavian is often sub-question is why did it happen. So the writers use the crime fiction to try to analyze the society in a way. And of course, my writing has changed a bit because I'm more experienced, and I tend to try to in the later years to understand more historical questions. I also write some historical books because I think it's very important to understand history, to understand ourselves and the time we live in.
Tell us more about your standalone novels. You talk about the historical fiction, which is set during the Nazi occupation of Norway. Then one of your novels is set in Kenya, set in Africa.
Yes.
Yeah. So just tell us know about this. Let us know about this whole evolution.
The book Little Drummer has takes place both in Norway and in Africa, and the reason is that I was interested in the relationship between rich countries and poor countries, the aid that are given from rich countries to poor countries often goes wrong because of sometimes corruption or greed or the organization of it. So I was interested in one special kind of aid given to people living in villages around Lake Victoria in Kenya, because Norway has strong tradition for fisheries. They wanted to help to make the fisheries more effective in the Lake Victoria, and the reason was this a disaster, because they emptied the lake for fish, and now the lake is starting to grow, so it's very difficult to make fish to fish there. So I was interested in those connections, and so I invented a crime story. I invented a murder in Norway that had relations to Africa, and that is the way I write. I try to do a lot of research. I'm very inspired by research, because learning new things makes me more eager to learn more, and I get the inspiration to write my own things.
Tell us more about your research into the history and also the police, the way the police operates, and
Yes, like this book, The Little Drummer, there was the research was going on in Africa. I had to go there, but I also had been there because before I started to write, I was a teacher in high school, and we had exchange programs with the African schools. So I was so lucky I could travel there and I could learn a lot of things. So that's when the idea came from that time I was in Africa as a teacher. And then I had to go back to start to to find out what was going on, make interviews with the local people, being with them, fishing, and try to interview journalists that knew about these projects and how they had failed, etc., etc. And then I was also inspired because I am always inspired by meeting people, and the models for these people in Africa, the African policemen, the African journalist, is live models. So that's the way I work, So, and also I'm looking at photos and seeing newsreels, old films, anything that can highlight the theme is in my interest.
Tanuj and Bulbul, Tanuj Solanki has written 4 works of fiction, literary fiction, the 4th one being Manji's Mayhem. I want to know why you decided to write this novel in the genre of crime.
Yeah, so I think I've still written a novel. So, I've written 4 works of fiction, and there is a genre difference between my, the latest book, Manji's Mayhem, and the other 3 that have preceded it. But I have always been a reader of crime fiction. So a reader of American crime fiction in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and also a reader of Scandinavian police procedurals and Nordic crime. So I kind of knew that I will write a crime novel one day, and thankfully I wrote it now in 2022 when I had the skills, like when I could take it on. Had I tried the same novel, the same subject matter 4 or 5 years ago, I might have butchered it. So, but I really enjoyed it. I think a certain kind of crime novel has been missing more or less in Indian English, which is to say the kind of Raymond Chandler, Jim Thompson kind of 1930s, 40s. In the US, we saw a lot of it. What you would call pulp fiction, or what would sell at one time in the US for 35 cents at bus stations and all. So we don't have a lot of that in India in English. And we have had that. The other language, Indian language I'm familiar with is Hindi. So we have had a tradition of that in Hindi, but not so much in English. And I wanted to write something pulpy, sexy, and something that can be picked up and finished in 4 hours, while still saying some things which need to be said in today's India. So it was a tough project, but I had enough inspiration from crime writers who have come before me.
How did you create this character, this anti-hero Manji? And what was the inspiration, and how did you go about it?
So I thought, the plot comes later, right? First you make the person in your head. And my first ever short story, I wrote it, I think, in 2009 or 2010. It somehow had a security guard in it, right? And it's a bad short story, and never published. But the figure of the security guard was always in my head, in the sense that in India especially, security guards outside malls or cafes or other places like this, they are basically guarding entry to a place that they themselves cannot enter, or at least cannot enter as a full person. And that idea was always in my head ever since I started writing. And so it was clear to me that there would be this person who would be a security guard outside a posh cafe, and this person has some story, and he's angry about his position in the world. And then things start to happen. Right across the street, there's a restaurant, and there's the restaurant hostess. She and this hero or anti-hero of ours, they start to look at each other, and they find each other attractive, and things start to happen. But I think so. The first thing in my mind was the character as to what their location is going to be. I was also very clear that once I describe Manji's workplace, I also need to describe where he lives, because I wanted to paint a full picture of the person. So he's not only a security guard, he has to go back somewhere, he has to live. And that's why somewhere in the book you'll also find a scene where he has to wash his clothes, like he doesn't have a washing machine and all. So there is this, unlike, the kind of scenes you would see in a crime novel, I just took time, I'll give it 2 pages, and for 2 pages, Manji does nothing but wash his clothes. So I wanted to make this whole full person, and then the plot comes after it, things happen chapter by chapter and so on, yeah.
And you have also envisaged this as a series, so like a book 2 and a book 3.
So yeah, I mean, inspired by Scandinavian crime, and in Sweden or Denmark or other countries, I think typical format is once you have success, you write 10 of them. Like 10 seems to be the number. So I didn't have that number in mind, but I definitely do want to write more Manji novels. So Manji is not dead. I mean, that much we know by the end of the first book. And I've in fact started writing the second one, and the challenge again is to find him a workplace and some work, which basically for me is a trope for Manji to meet people, and therefore the plot kickstarts as Manji goes to work, and he meets people and new things happen. So yeah, I think we will have 5 Manji novels if I can keep writing these, or if I can keep conjuring the plots for these. And there's also a larger arc. In the first novel, I've given suggestions that there is a backstory to Manji as to where he comes from and all that, but I haven't really revealed it. So if the publishers somehow allow me to write 4 or 5 Manji novels, then hopefully in the 4th or 5th one we'll get to that as well, and Manji goes back to his village and finishes his unfinished business or something like that. But yeah, so I very much want to stay with Sevaram Manji and write, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 novels.
Bulbul, you have written across genres, more than 24 books. Children's, you've done a lot of fiction, non-fiction. Why did you choose this colonial whodunit genre and cozy crime, as you say? And you even said that there is not even a single drop of blood mentioned in any of your books. So how do we even call it crime?
I don't know how. I think I shouldn't be here. I feel like a fraud because my book is so not Scandi-noir. It's totally very cozy crime. You'll be able to sleep at night after reading, which I couldn't reading his brilliant novel. I was like, ugh. But I was inspired. I write, basically my fiction has always been for adults, has been family concerns, mainly about women and their changing role in today's India. But I was inspired because I spent a lot of time in Goa, and next to my house is an old people's home. It's called the Happy Home for Aged. So, and the people there were so feisty, and they were always having a good time. And suddenly, there was a murder in the village. And these 2 of them actually decided to go and help the police. So I was gifted this novel, and I decided I have to write about them. So that was Murder in the Happy Home. And then next one was Murder in Simla, which is a 1940s Simla. And I wanted to write about this police officer who was actually my great uncle. And he joined the police force very much against his family because they thought he shouldn't be working for the British. But he just wanted to be a cop. And when he goes to this English commissioner's home to solve the murder, they don't want to talk to him. They don't want to talk to a native guy. They want a proper white man to solve their. So there's a lot of undercurrent. There is a murder. That somebody's died. There's a body somewhere. But there are also a lot of layers of what is happening in their life at that point. And I enjoyed that much more than, I'm a little squeamish about the dead body, so I try to keep it far away.
Also, Shimla features in a lot of your other writings also.
Right.
So what's the reason?
Well, I spend a lot of time in Himachal. I live in a small orchard called Shaya, and my first book, Tailor of Giripul, was also based there in Shaya Tales. So there's just, you'd think life in a small village in Himachal would be quiet, but no, it's very exciting and there are lots of things happening. I really admire you guys coming after lunch to listen about murder, because murder should be dealt with in the morning. I think afternoon should be other sort of romantic things.
My question to Sheel and Tanuj, how important is the choice of setting for a crime novel. For instance, Manji's is set in the underbelly of Mumbai. Your Oslo series are mostly set in Oslo, but they moved to Kenya for the little drama. So just wanted to know the importance of a setting.
The setting in Oslo is very important in this series because the first book in this series was written in '93, and the last one, the latest one, is written in 2018. So the city of Oslo has changed a lot, and the whole community, whole Norway has changed. But so I like to talk about Oslo as a special character in the book because. Is some of the inspiration to see how the city is today and like it was many years ago, and one of the ideas by Little Drummer was I also wanted to write about the relationship between police and press, so. So I wanted them to be a place where there was no natural authority and one being more authority to the other, and so then the village in Africa was perfect for that, and also it was perfect because of the theme of fishing and aid going wrong.
I wanted to talk about. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, so Mumbai is the setting for Manji's Mayhem, and the word underbelly actually is on the blurb, and blurbs are usually things that writers, by the time the blurb is written, the writer is tired and they are like, okay, let's say underbelly. But I don't think Manji's Mayhem is about the underbelly of Bombay. It's actually the belly in the main. The city of Bombay is a city of migrants, and Sevaram Manji is a migrant in Mumbai, and he's trying to make a living. He works as a security guard, and I think most of Mumbai, if we do any kind of statistical survey, we'll find that the belly of Bombay is people like this. Bombay is made of people like this. So that was it. In terms of geographical set, I mean, there are two kinds of settings, right? One is the identifiable city or space that you set your story in. So that definitely is Bombay. I've lived in Bombay for 9 years, so it was kind of natural for me to do that. The other kind of setting, which I think becomes important in a crime novel, is also the interiors, right? Because the action doesn't always happen on the streets, and so the specific rooms that you want things to happen in, or the lanes in which you want things to happen in. So that was also very important for me. So I spent a lot of time, thinking about rooms where the action happens, and where the table would be, and where the chair would be, and what would Manji break next. So at the cafe, for example, there's a description of how the cafe is, and so that also to me was part of the setting, because there are all these urban spaces inside Bombay. Some are accessible easily if you have the money. Some are not accessible to people who don't have the money. And so setting to me was also not just the city of Bombay as we understand it, but also specific interior or specific rooms and spaces inside Bombay. So yeah.
I think setting is very important in a crime novel, because when you're reconstructing it, when you're going back to why it happened, you have to let the reader visualize that this is where the body was found, and this is where everybody else was. So even in both my books, in Murder in Simla, the house is a very important character in the book, and even in Murder in the Happy Home for Aged, again, the body is found in a well outside the old house. So I think that's very important.
All your works feature very strong women characters. If they are not involved in the actual solving of the crime, then they have a very strong mind of their own, like Santosh and Manji. So I just wanted to know whether crime writing, contemporary crime writing has started allowing room for like more well-rounded women characters. All three of you.
Can you repeat?
Asking about strong women characters.
Yes, I like to have this book. The Courier there's a female protagonist, and if a woman a man or a woman shall carry a story or be present in a story, it needs to have some character, right? So, and but at the same time, you have the culture. You have to write things so people believe it, and sometimes people are strong, sometimes people are weak. But if they have a major part, like in Little Drummer, there's a journalist, she has to be strong because she is confronting this policeman. And I like that. I like to the layers that exist when man confronts women and women confronts man, because there can be power, but there also can be some sub sexual things in it, and I like to try to describe those things.
Yeah. So I don't know, like I don't think and write strong women or like put them in there in the plots. I mean, tomorrow there may be weak women in my in one of my stories, so not really wedded to the idea. I mean, there are women in the stories and they do what they do. Some of them are strong in that sense, and I think we make a big deal of strong women in fiction these days. I think especially in India, in our movies, etc. I think it's all right. I don't think in those terms. So Santosh is what she is. She's pretty much like Manji in the sense that she's also a migrant to Bombay and she's also trying to make a living. And that's it. I mean, she's a working woman in that sense, and whatever she is, she is. I didn't think of her in terms of, oh, I have to make Santosh strong in any particular way. And which is also to say that tomorrow I write another novel, there may be a strong woman in it, there may be a weak woman. I think women are allowed to be what they want to be in my stories.
Can I speak on his behalf? Santosh is really feisty. You know, she's like really something. You have to read his work to find out about Santosh. My women, you know, when I wrote my first collection of short stories years ago, the critics said it's very interesting. I got good reviews, but there was one line which said, "Why are the men so weak?" And the word "wimp" hadn't been discovered then. Later on, so I got very conscious of the fact, and I'd always sort of add the women were strong in any case, so I'd always add one strong man. So when I wrote the murder mysteries, somehow I killed the women. I was so conscious of the strong man. So for me, it's been a conscious effort to make the men strong. My women are always strong.
I have a general question for the three of you. How much inspiration do you draw from the real situation of like crime in the country? And do you think that the popularity of crime writing is linked in some ways to the growing crimes like across the world?
There's a joke in Norway that in Norway there's around 50 murders a year, but in a novel there can be several more. So I don't think the rate of crime is an inspiration. I think it more I use the criminal incident to talk about something else, and so the criminal incident is some kind of alibi for me when I write.
Yeah, the same for me as well. I think the crime novel is a way to say things, and it opens a door for you because you have some sort of a format, or at least you can think of it as a format. That doesn't make it any easier to write one, but it does allow you to say certain things. So has any of my personal experience or great deal of research into security guards gone into writing Manji? The answer is no. But you also are not ever writing everything as a primary thing, right? You're not writing as the first crime novel about Bombay or the first crime story in Bombay. That's not what I'm writing, right? There is work before, there's movies, there's books. Then there are movies and books in other parts of the world that you can think of, hey, this happened in New York, but this could just as well happen in Bombay as well. So as a reader, you basically imbibe all that in, and so research can therefore also happen in a secondary way as well. But primarily for me, my pull towards crime fiction is for the same reason. You are actually saying something about the world, about the real world, where these things happen, and that is your true interest. Yeah.
The same thing with me, because but even when I write a murder mystery story, it's still concerned with the limited world I write about family concerns, about society, about women, how they deal with their everyday problems, and how they have to cope with sometimes very limited resources in India, and cope on different levels. The crime is just another part of that. I think but to tell you the truth, I mean, they are very established crime writers, but I don't really want to write another crime novel. You have to work so hard. You have to remember what you wrote in the first chapter. When I write my other novels, I can just go on and do whatever I want to. But here, my editor, generally it's not the editor, it's some young, very bright girl who'll ring you up and say, but ma'am, in your first chapter, this man's name was Ramesh, and by the 8th chapter, you've changed his name. I've forgotten his name. I thought he was dead, but but I had killed the wrong person. So I thought, oh my God! I go on the laptop. I go back to chapter 1, which of course I've lost, and where is this Ramesh? I thought he was, dead. So it's really stressful. I don't know how you do it all the time. You should give him a round of applause. I'm not going to write any more crime.
So a question for Sheil: 6 of the 11 Oslo detective series have been translated into English. So 2 parts to the question: are you closely involved in the translation process? And B, do you think the translation takes away from the raw language of the crime writing? And also, do you think that one needs to retain a lot of local dialect in the English translation?
In the some languages I cannot read, like
I'm talking about the English translation.
the English translation. The translator is a good friend of mine, so he's very generous. So he sends his script to me, and I go through it. But I respect him. But sometimes there's maybe some cultural things that I have to adjust a bit. But he's very, very clever, very, very clever. So he's very good at keeping the atmosphere correct.
Yeah, that's very important. It's very skillful.
How much time do we have? Should we open the floor for questions, or should we? Yeah. We can ask a lot of questions. Is it on? We'll do the Q&A for like 7 to 10 minutes, and then I'll ask like my concluding questions, because we still have 14 minutes to go. Yeah.
How do you maintain tension and like a dramatic atmosphere when writing crime? Because I feel like if you're writing something that requires crime as a major element, you need to maintain the tension for a long period of time. So how do you do that and create an atmosphere of horror as well, in addition to crime?
He's the one who announced.
In my case, Manji's Mayhem, one of the things I did was not talk about so let's say chapter 4, something has happened. So let's not talk about it immediately in chapter 5. Let's go elsewhere, right? So the reader is left with an event that has happened, is somewhat important, but you don't gratify the reader immediately. You talk about something else which is important, but then you come back to it in, chapter 6, 7, 8, whenever. So that's one of the things I have done. But so my novel particularly is not a murder mystery, in the sense that there's no big murder that happens in the first or second chapter, and then there is tension or horror to be built. So the problem is actually for
No. In my case, it's just ending on a note that the reader wants to go ahead. and find out why it happened. And so just leave each chapter with a question for the next chapter.
It's about creating small mysteries under the way, you know, so the reader is kept a little bit curious.
Hi. My question is about your process of writing the story. That the resolution comes first and then you backtrack on the clues and how the plot proceeds. How is it like? Yeah. I mean, what is it like? The end comes first in your mind and then you backtrack, come to the clues, and then how it goes hand in hand with the plot. So that is my question.
It's very different, you know. Sometimes I'm interested in one character and the story goes on and I don't know the end at all. And I have to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. But sometimes I know the end because that's the end that interests me, you know. So it's very, very different how it starts. But I know some writers plot the stories, you know, they use calculation schemes and stuff. I do not that. I start at page 1 and the book, the story comes like the road you go.
In my case, in the novel, there is the mystery of the missing money bag. And so chapter 3 or 4, you know that there is a missing bag full of money. I mean, and I was writing linear, right? Like, so I write very much like begin with chapter 1, 2. So it's also a discovery for me. And I did reach a point around 60 or 70% part of the novel, according to me, that time. And I was like, okay, where is the money bag? I don't know where it is. And then you have to, then it's a bit of maths, right? Like you have to figure out, okay, last it was seen here, so you play the detective also. So, but I really want not to do it the next time like this. So maybe I'll have the money bag figured first of all and then come to.
Well, in my case, as I explained before, it's really tough. It's like maths, and I used to get 0 in maths in school. But you have to, so what I do actually, I work out the end in my mind, sort of an end. Then it's easier for me to go the other way around. So because unless you have the end, it's very stressful because you really don't know where you're going. So the end is really important.
Are you inspired by anybody? Like an Agatha Christie is your inspiration, or
Yes,
any-
I am.
oh,
Definitely, I am. I don't think they are answering for
So
them
who are
also.
yours? Who inspires you? Arthur Conan Doyle, or
For me, it's the American guys, Jim Thompson, Raymond Chandler, you know, mostly. And Manji's Mayhem is also that kind of novel. I mean, so it's not a police procedural. If I were to ever write a police procedural, which is about the murder has happened, the cop comes in and they have to figure out, right? Then I would read the Nordic mysteries. I think they are.
Hercule? How do you pronounce it? Hercule Poirot?
Not my type of mystery, but
None of you.
No. I'm just speaking for myself.
I'm inspired by Miss Marple.
Marple.
Hugely. I
Oh,
love
great.
Miss
So-
Marple.
so
I
am
was
I.
Miss Marple in my last life.
Give her a big hand for that, please.
Well done. Can take 2 more questions.
Yeah, hi. When you write your novel, are you a criminal or are you the detective when you write the novel? What role do you play? Because that's very important, right?
I think you have to be both.
Yeah, but which one do you usually take? Do you take the role of the crime or the role of the detective? Because somebody's a hero at the end of the day.
Yes. I think in a crime fiction story, there has to be some kind of justice. So the police will win in a way, but not always 100%, because there's a lot of layers in these stories, and why did it happen? So you have to have, sometimes you have to have sympathy for the villain too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a person in my novel by the name of Vinod who does just a couple of things. In one of the scenes, he walks up to Sevaram Manji, gives him a cigarette, and then 2 minutes later asks for 1500 rupees. You know, and when I was writing that scene, I was also Vinod Jatav, you know, that guy. So you have to become everyone, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to become everyone. And sometimes you get a little fond of your criminals. And then you say, okay, now relax, you know, don't get so. You have to find a way of making them really like have something really mean and cruel about them. And you get into your characters.
One more question.
Hi. So my question is now, how important is it in today's date for your, I mean, the criminal per se to be not really a black or white character? I mean, you know, there's a lot of shades of gray. So you don't really show a bad guy as really evil. You have his shades of, you know, his background usually has something what made him a criminal or something that's, you know, that's given him that color. Or is it you can just go with the tradition of the bad guy being totally a bad guy, or you know, or does he have shades of some good in him?
I think as a writer, you have to be some kind of, in crime fiction, you need some kind of realism that the story reflects the society in a way, in contradiction, in race and politics. But the author's job has always been to go into the head of people, either they're men, women, black, white, to try to convince the reader that this is the guy. So you have to just do the job, try. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes not.
Like for instance, if you like your question, if you, I don't know, many of you must have read Ruth Rendell. Like, she totally goes into the psychological aspect of why he did this. So, but that I feel is almost another genre, isn't it? If you're going towards why the crime more than, you know, how or when it was done and why it was done. So my guys are bad.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the story, right? Like, and so there is evil in the world, and sometimes, I mean, if you're writing about a serial killer, I haven't done that, but I think the writer will have to work really hard to have a shade of gray somewhere, right? So it really depends on the story.
We can take one more question, one last question, and then I'll.
Hello. As a reader, sometimes it gets really difficult, mentally exhausting to read few of the chapters. So as an author, does it get mentally exhausting to write few of the chapters because maybe they are just that hard to write, or the plot is such a way that, you know, those particular chapters are difficult to write, in a sense? Does that happen?
With me, no, it doesn't happen. Like, so I like it. You know, I like when I'm writing it, I like it. If I'm not liking it, if I'm bored, then I'll cut it. I'll cut whatever I'm writing.
Absolutely, he's right. If you're bored with what you're writing, poor reader, usne paise bhi diye, you know, can you imagine? So no way. You have to really enjoy what you're doing.
I write every day. I mean, I've been made a living of writing for many years. So I write in the morning, and I can write 3 or 4 hours, and then the brain is dried up, and I cannot write anymore that day. But sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. But it takes time to judge it, because the stuff has to mature. So it's a very long process, writing.
My question to all three of you: have there been any film, television adaptation of any of your works? And if there is an offer, if an offer comes your way to adapt your own, like write the screenplay of your own book, are you going to take it up?
Well, there is a sort of discussion. You know how these things take forever? Discussion about murder in Simla. But I don't think I'd like to be involved in the script, because that's a different skill. And unless you're really skilled in this highly competitive world, You really don't want to go in there.
Highly competitive world
Of
or world
cinema,
of okay.
no, cinema, you know, of crime fiction being turned into.
Yeah, for Manji's Mayhem, there is some interest, nothing on paper yet, and it is possible that someone might ask me to write the screenplay. I would love to do that. I have no idea how screenplays are written, but I'll go take some crash courses or something like that on Coursera, and at least take a shot at it, like see what happens. But yeah, I really am hopeful that something will happen for this book. There is some interest, so there's reason to be hopeful.
I am a little old-fashioned. I think it's two different things, books and movies. I've written a couple of screenplays that has become movies, but I would never like to see my
But
books.
they are not based on the books.
No. I would never like to see a book be a movie, because a book is much richer. It's so when I read a book, I have a movie in my head, and if you read the same book, you have another movie in your head.
It's also a major revenue source for writers, so you are losing out on big monies, and so are your publishers. And
One of my short stories got made into a short film for television in Australia, and the script, they sent me the script, and I couldn't recognize a single character in it. But they were all very nice. I mean, the basic storyline was same, and I just felt fine. Just send me the check. I'm happy.
my last question to Sheel: are your books available in India? Do you want to? I mean, have you considered having a local Indian publisher? I mean, because
They are in English only.
No. I'm saying, are the books readily available in India? Is there an Indian edition? Because
No, I don't think so.
Barring one book, the rest of the works are published by an independent press, and I don't know whether they have strong distribution ties with India. So
I don't know about that. Sorry.
I think we are short of time. So let's have a big round of applause for our panelists, and I hope to see more works.